Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Marco Jure Show, everyone. It is Friday, October 24th, 2025, as our week comes to a close. Thank you for tuning in to today's show to hear all the relevant, groundbreaking news here in America and around the world, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths always thrive here. Please don't forget to follow the show, share it with whomever needs to hear the truth in our push to unwoke America. And again, thank you to those that have been doing that. I appreciate you so much. Hope everyone's ready now for the best hour radio has to offer. Uncensored and ready to go. Let's dive right in head first. Well, my first line of business here is our Friday economic report. Why not? Let's talk to you about the economy today and how the country is doing. Well, I saw this article in the Wall Street Journal today, and I said, perfect. Let's take a look at it. Let's break it all down, shall we? And of course, as per usual, yep, I got to tell you, things are not looking good, folks. Here's the headline. It says that inflation edges up, but less than expected, to 3% rate. Wow. Just 3%. Not bad. Not bad. You paying 3% more for goods? What could be wrong there? The annual inflation heated up slightly in September, but not as much as economists have expected, giving the Fed a clear path for widely expected rate cuts heading into their remaining meetings this year. Consumer prices rose up from 3% from a year earlier today. So think about it. During the end of the Biden administration, the economy was in complete chaos, and now we're up 3% since then. That's what the Labor Department is saying today. Now, slightly hotter than August increase of 2.9%, and the fastest pace since January. So things are heating up. Understand that. Inflation is starting to heat back up again. And again, the reason for this is the rate cuts. Now, some of you are saying, what are you talking about, the rate cuts? Why would the rate cuts have anything to do with this? Well, here's the problem. When the Fed decides to cut the rates, it allows people to have more leverage to purchase more, to buy more. But it also gives people more money to, again, take out loans, things of that nature. So you have the Fed printing out more dollars out in circulation, and that M1 money supply that's ours. That means you have more dollars chasing the same amount of goods. Right? Now, again, it makes sense. You want to invest, you want to reinvest, you want to change things. Well, that's part of the problem. You're going to see a dollar get weaker, and that's why you're seeing inflation begin to rise slowly, but, it is rising. It is not going down. Prices are not resuming to where they were pre-pandemic. Plandemic. Now, a measure of core prices, look at this. Consumer prices rose 3% from a year earlier. Yep, look at that. Everything's going up, folks. Again, both came in at lower levels. Expectations for a 3.1% rise as pressure on housing costs ease. Oh, let's talk about the housing market quick. Let's talk about that. We still have a 6.19% fixed rate mortgage rate. Yep. Lowest in over a year for a 30-year mortgage rate. Look at all that money you're going to be taking out just to buy that same stupid house. The decline boosted buyer purchasing power by about $9,500 compared to just 1 month ago. Wow. Forgot that the average home price is exasperately higher. Just ridiculously higher. Look at this. Rates were slightly higher, around 6.4%, limiting affordability and dampening buyer enthusiasm just last year. So we're seeing that the price went down just a little bit, but we're still seeing this housing bubble. And again, it's going to start to bust very, very soon. You're still seeing lots of brick and mortar vacancies, buildings that aren't being used or purchased. And so someone's got to pay those banks for those buildings. And what happens when people default on those folks? That's when you start to see the bust. You're going to start to see it happen. So while it's a little bit of cooling in the housing market, it's not by much. It's not enough to make any bit of a difference, sadly enough. Let's go over some other statistics I'm seeing here. Obviously, inflation remains a sticky issue. Price increases above where policymakers want them, of course. But let's look at this. We got gold prices dropped to $4,153 from the Monday high of $4,389.30. So gold went from a record high, by the way, on Monday, and has dropped a little bit. We got silver up 10 cents to $49.10 an ounce, up 10 cents from yesterday. Earlier this week, it was $53 an ounce. Platinum sitting at $1,634.10, down $3 from the start of this week. I told you before, I said this again, I'll say it again. You got to invest in precious metals, folks. That's where the real equity is for you. That's what you want. You want to buy it. It's a precious metal. It's not going to lose its overall value. It can't. That's why it's been used for thousands of years. But Bitcoin is up because they want it to be up. So they're going to invest in that. Stock market is up. Dow Jones, S&P 500, NASDAQ, all up. Let's talk oil, though. What about oil? We know we got the sanctions happening with Russia right now. It was just announced on Wednesday. But we got both Brent crude and WTI jumping up. From earlier this week, it appears Brent crude was up, let's see, 3% after the sanctions on Russia were announced. Yep. But now they're down about 4.27%. Brent crude today is trading at about $62.04 per barrel right now. And again, that number will change as the day goes on, just slightly. And of course, the WTI was trading at $62.06, down $4.70 from the previous day. And again, these numbers can still change, but understand this. With these sanctions on Russian oil, right, we talked about this yesterday. Trump is putting on sanctions on Russia to get them to be coerced to end this war with Ukraine, which, again, really doesn't make any sense because Vladimir Putin wants a peace deal, not a ceasefire deal. So why the hell would we not want to push for that? Again, it's nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense to me. But again, we know they're targeting their two biggest oil refineries out in Russia. So you can expect those gas prices to go up very soon in America. Unless by some miracle, of course, we become energy independent again, which would be fantastic. But I don't think we're there just yet. By the way, Gerald Celente of the Trends Journal on his podcast yesterday said this about AI, by the way. This is important. I want you to hear this. This is through CNBC. He said, AI is already taking white-collar jobs. And again, you could expect more of that. And you could also expect a dot-com bust in the near future. Again, they're going to go bankrupt just like we saw between 2000, 2002, right? Where we saw this dot-com boom, right? In the late 90s in Silicon Valley and what have you. But, the overvaluing of many of these tech companies right now, well, guess what? That's what they're going to go bust if, again, we don't lead this AI market. So, again, we have to think about what they're doing with AI right now, especially in China and India, who are going to be leading the way. And again, it's going to cause people to begin to lose their jobs, and it's going to happen. So I told you, we're going to have a housing bust. Again, we have 20% vacancies, and again, in these brick and mortars. We have homes that are unaffordable to many average Americans. They're not being bought up. We're seeing companies like BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard going and buy up multiple single-home communities. It's disgusting. Shouldn't even be happening. It should be illegal that they do this. But again, they want to push you further and further towards feudalism. That's what they want. This is why they're buying up lots of homes in America. And in fact, they're estimating, I think they said by 2030, they want to get something around 60% of single-family homes in America bought up. These big investment firms that are worth trillions upon trillions of dollars. Think about Larry Fink. Think about all those jackasses that do that. So the American dream slips away on that front. Then you have AI taking jobs, white-collar jobs, good-paying jobs, right? That you would have, very skilled workers working. Gerald Celente later said in the show, health insurance costs are up for a third year in a row, again, estimating to be somewhere around $27,000 per family. Can you imagine that? $27,000 a year on health care? Pretty insane, if you ask me. Thank God for the Affordable Care Act, though, right? Yeah, thank God for those Democrats advocating for your taxpayer money to be used for illegal aliens. Wonderful. No wonder the government wants to pay for it. Who the hell can afford it? Who can afford something that expensive? Again, we have the wonderful American diet. We can go into that. Ultra-processed foods, food dyes, glyphosate as a pesticide sprayed on the crops. Animals eat the crops to make it fatter, to bring them to the market quicker. So you're eating grain-fed, soy, corn that these animals eat. You're eating the animal, which causes them to be sick. It's just awful. Awful. Again, go look at the European diet. Go look at the ingredients. Go look what they actually put in there. There's no food dyes in any of this. It's illegal. And I applaud RFK Jr. for giving a push to get rid of these red dyes, which are some of the worst ones. They're all bad for you. But we know red dyes distracts, especially young kids, from learning. It affects the attention span, what have you. But we have the, sugar and everything. Sugar this, sugar that. Then you have the fake diet sodas with the aspartame that causes optic nerve degradation, blindness, seizures, strokes, calcium carbonate in the water. All this, it's just the junk food in general that we give to kids. Go look what they serve kids in an average cafeteria. It'll make you sick to your stomach. But when we lower the quality of food, which is happening in America, it's ultra-processed. That's what it is, by and large. Unless you're trying to eat as clean as you can, which I always tell you to try to eat organic. If you're not eating good foods, you're affecting your health in some way. Right? We have the most vaccinated nation in the world right now, especially among children, and they've never been sicker. They've never been sicker at all. And we've got a lot of work to do on this. But this is why it's jumping up these healthcare costs as well. Not only are you paying for the illegal alien when you go to your wonderful checkup, your visits, and what have you, you're also just generally sicker. So you have to go to the hospital more. You got to pay for more medication. It's a money-making scheme. Many of these food companies, by the way, own some of these, chemical industry, right? They own the food industry, and they also work in the medicine industry. Isn't it great? It's like a, trifecta of sickness that just keeps going on and on and on. So while I wish I had some better news on the economy, I don't, unfortunately. Let's talk this, though, in the article. It says, still the latest figures show that inflation isn't proving to be as big a worry as the Fed officials initially feared when President Trump announced big tariffs this spring. The United States has collected around $30 billion in tariff revenue in September alone. Now let's pause. $30 billion in tariffs in September alone? That sounds great, right? We got $30 billion, right? And the foreign companies that exported their goods to the United States as imports paid it, right? Not so fast. You paid for it, dunce. That's why you're seeing an increase in the prices. Again, that's why you're saying slowly but surely, 3%. Okay, things are going up. This is up more. The reason why this is happening is not only just the tariffs, of course. We're not producing as much as we ought to, which is a big problem. You are paying that $30 billion, folks. A tariff is a tax, and you are the ones who are paying for it. That's why you're seeing consumer prices rising. For no reason other. Again, we have the sanctions for the oil. That makes sense for that. But these tariffs are causing the consumer price index to begin to rise. Now, yes, you'll say, well, some things are down. Gas prices are down. Yes, I understand that. They're going to shoot up again soon, though. Again, unless we become energy independent. But you're slowly seeing this gradual increase. And again, it has to do with these tariffs. Let's open up free trade with these countries. Why not? Our country was founded on free enterprise, free trade, very limited tariffs on things. And again, when we use tariffs, again, in the early part of the 20th century, which is what everyone loves to point to, we didn't have a federal income tax at the time. So the government wasn't taxing your wages. So now we're getting our wages tax. We're paying sales tax, property tax, this tax and that tax, all this junk. We're taxed on everything multiple times, by the way. Taking more of your wealth while the dollar crumbles. And you're paying that $30 billion to the feds. So again, it makes absolute sense. The tariffs are probably the cause of all this. It has to be. Who else is going to make up that difference? Yes, sometimes a company can eat up a little bit of it, but they're not going to take up the brunt of the matter. If they can't pull a profit, they're going to come to you, the consumer. That's the way it's always been. And again, I know I talked to small business owners when Biden was running through his reign of terror with, the supply chain issues and all that nonsense, destroying our economy, basically. And they said to me, it's not fair that we just pass it on to the consumer, but we can only do it for so long. And again, that's why we saw prices skyrocket under the Biden-Harris regime. That's exactly why. So again, expect consumer prices to go up. We have tariff-related inflation, probably will remain a concern in the near term. But they're saying it's the job of the markets. They're becoming the more pressing issue for the Fed, with a clear chance of a low hire, low fire economy becomes a no fire, let's fire story. Yeah. So again, we talked about AI. That's going to be something big. You're going to see lots of jobs. Again, stop hiring, firing people. So we've got a lot of things going out against us. I don't know. I really don't know. Now, the White House said on social media on Friday that the shutdown means there likely won't be a report on October's inflation, which is probably good news for them, since surveyors who collect the price information cannot work in the field. There we go. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt credited the September numbers to Trump's economic agenda. I don't know what she's crediting him for. Month over month, prices rose 0.3% in September, below the 0.4% expectations. Core prices rose 0.2%. Yep, so things are slowly but surely increasing, so you won't notice it, but it's going to happen sooner or later. That's what's going to happen. Look at this, though. Coffee prices, which are highly sensitive to these tariffs, were up 18.9% in September from a year earlier. Beef prices are up 14.7%. We talked about that earlier in the week. He now wants to bring in Argentinian beef into the market for some ridiculous reason, other than he loves Melee. Is it Melee or Melee? I don't know what his name is. I don't really care. Why we give a damn about Argentina, again, is beyond me. Why are we not helping our local farmers and ranchers be able to produce right here in America with our own livestock, where they can earn a profit, live comfortably? Why are we working on that? Why are we so concerned about Argentina's economy? That's their damn business. Again, they already send in far more beef into the United States than, of course, we send to them. So it's okay we have a trade deficit with Argentina in the beef market, but we got to bring in more Argentinian beef because we like Melee? I thought their economy was supposed to be something we looked at. Isn't that what we heard? We're like, look at Melee, he's cutting this, inflation's down, it's a great country. Now, all of a sudden, their economy's dying. Well, that's on them. That's not on us. We already gave them, $40 billion? Just as of late? Then we wonder why we have inflation and we have the dollar dropping. You can't make this stuff up. So while we have some good economic news, overall, things are looking a little bit stagnant to me, folks. Again, I don't like these tariffs for the reasons I just laid out to you. And again, I hope that things will slowly improve in that aspect. All right, moving on. Paul Craig Roberts says there will be no Ukraine peace deal. What do we have? See, we have a crappy economy right now. And now we get to look forward to a war. Isn't that how it always works? When we have a crappy economy, what do we always do? We go to war. That's how things work. When you have men out of work because of AI, where do you send them? You send them to war to die, right? Oh, for the better good of the country, of course, don't we? Now, one wonders how much longer Vladimir Putin and Sergei Lavrov will take it or even comprehend the situation they're in right now. But for 4 years now, we have Vladimir Putin and Lavrov both demonstrating enormous interest in ending this conflict by resolving the basic cause. What was the basic cause? Well, it was a thing that's not being underlined, as I said to you yesterday in yesterday's show. Vladimir Putin does not want NATO on his borders. He wants a security agreement, cooperation treaty with them to ensure this. And he wants a peace treaty with Ukraine. That's what he's interested in. He doesn't want a ceasefire. He doesn't want the EU countries to restock and rearm Ukraine so the war can continue on. He wants it over with. He's got the territories he wants, and he wants it over with. But the West says no. And the reason they're telling you no is because they want to take us to war. I hate to tell you that, but that's really what it's coming down to. Now, the West never bothered to understand the basic conflict. Really is just Washington's hegemonic foreign policy. And of course, you can look at the Wolfowitz Doctrine for that. And NATO and U.S. missile bases, on Russia's border in both Poland and Romania. He doesn't want that either. The Kremlin has been reluctant to see this and the provocations, such as the conflict in Ukraine created by the United States Zionist neoconservatives, as a declaration of war on Russia. Never forget this, too. Donald Trump sent in the CIA back in either it was 2018 or 2019 to train Ukrainians how to kill Russians. I think they made about 20 different bases where they were doing this. So when we say, this is Biden's war, yeah, Biden got us into the war. Biden could have scrapped the war right away. But these issues, this whole proliferation of what was happening in Ukraine, well, it really began under Obama, but Trump also aided to what happened. So for him saying, well, if I was president still, this wouldn't have happened, we don't know that. We can't really say. But this helped escalate the situation. Again, Vladimir Putin is not stupid, but he's very insouciant about what he's doing in this conflict, unfortunately. So now we see the Kremlin mistakenly has relied on the West coming to its senses and, of course, realizing that profits from economic interactions are preferable to war, especially nuclear war. So we have this reliance on common sense by the Kremlin has proven to be wrong. And again, Putin made a very bad bet with this. He's expecting Donald Trump to come in and stop this. What have we seen? We've seen it just continue to escalate and the war continue on. And more dead soldiers on both sides. So now we have John Helmer has pointed out that no Western government wants to end the conflict because of the large rake-off in commissions from weapon sales. That's why we're sending them all these weapons, too. Then we couldn't send it to Ukraine because we didn't want to just give it away. We said, we'll sell to the NATO countries, and then they'll give it to Ukraine. So again, we're fighting a proxy war. We're using Ukraine as the bait. And really, they're getting their asses kicked day in and day out. Again, I don't say that to, speak badly about Ukrainians or besmirch them. But they're not winning this conflict. They have no way to win this conflict. That's just the truth of the matter. I'm not saying the men don't fight bravely or love their nation. Of course they do. But there's no way for them to win this conflict. So, what's the end of this? Where does this go? Are Russians tired of it? Are they tired of Putin's endless toleration of this nonsense? We're seeing the red lines crossed. We're seeing new constant drone strikes deep inside Russia. How much longer are they going to allow this to happen? Will Russia allow the United States to send in Tomahawk missiles now to Ukraine? Who's going to use these Tomahawk missiles? Because they don't know how to use them. They don't even know how to use F-16s, which are about 50 years old. So are we really going to put our boys on the ground in Ukraine to launch Tomahawk missiles towards Moscow? You want to talk about the war escalating out of control? This is exactly what will do it. But the never-ending enforcing, Russia declaring these red lines and doing nothing about it now, Putin created a picture of Russia really unwilling and, of course, unable to fight for its sovereignty, which is what he's doing in Ukraine right now. He's trying to save the ethnic Russians in the Donbass, Zaporizhia, Kherson, and, of course, Crimea as well. So the West has noticed this. Trump's noticed this, having, again, abandoned the peace role this week. Obviously, we know that happened. And, of course, returning as the bully to put on these sanctions that I just talked to you about earlier on their oil industry, and hopefully to get them to a ceasefire in place without addressing any type of root causes, because they're not interested in the root causes. They're interested in their own hegemonic foreign policy. Again, Look at the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Any nation that poses any type of economical threat or anything that threatens the position of the United States as a superpower needs to be deemed a threat. That's what Russia is. That's what China is. And that's why, really, we hate these countries. That's what it comes down to. Again, the White House has now declared that the Trump meeting with Putin is off for now. Why? I have no idea. You can't say you're a peace candidate or a peace president. That's why we voted for President Trump, too, by the way. He said he'd end these wars in a day. He said the war in Gaza would be over by the time he got in office. Look where we are 10 months later. We're still knee-deep in this garbage. And they're only getting worse and worse and worse. If you thought the war between Israel and Iran is over, you got something else coming to you. But Trump again has rolled out other punishments, using the U.S. Treasury, imposing sanctions on Russian oil. Think Lukoil, think Rosneft, right? These big oil refineries. We're going to crush your economy. Now, do you think Vladimir Putin's going to take lightly to that? One of his foreign minister spokespeople said that this is not going to do anything. That this is not going to deter them from what their commitment is to their own sovereignty. This is what they've said. So now the U.S.'s Treasury's excuse is that Russia's lack of serious commitment to be a peace process to end the war in Ukraine. First of all, they're the ones that want peace. They want peace. This is what they want. They do not want a ceasefire. And again, we're reverting to sanctions that are going to have no adverse effects on Russia. But we will see the adverse effects on oil prices being spiked in the near future. I told you this to you earlier. Again, why are we doing this? Why are we continuing this war? Because the powers that be want to take us to war. This is what it comes down to, folks. This is your Trump administration right now. This is what it comes down to. So, we're not content with Russia, China, and Iran as America's chosen enemies. Trump needs to create more enemies, of course, for his preposterous order to India for not to buy Russia oil. I don't know if that's even going to stick, too. We saw that come out the other day. I don't think it's going to stick. They're all BRICS nation countries. I think they're going to stick with each other. I think they're just saying that in the hopes that this conflict ends. They continue buying it after the end of this year. So here's what Trump has done. And again, it is the worst possible thing he could do. He's going to drive up the price of oil, which will have an effect on Western economies adversely, including ours, should we not be energy independent. And again, it brings more revenues to Russia. That's what's going to happen. Again, this is going to lead us into a wider war, folks. I hate to be the one that tells you that. Paul Craig Roberts sees it. Many other brilliant minds see this as well. We are going closer and closer into a full-on war with Russia. I hope I'm wrong. I do. But again, I don't see Putin backing down from this. I think he'll call the bluff. And I don't know if Donald Trump will back down from this. I don't know if he can. The powers that be want us in this war. And it's pretty evident by what we see here. So no good news on that. While there was a little bit of shred of good news, this is in the Daily Mail. It says Trump threatens to cut all support for Israel and extraordinary escalation after JD Vance's personal insult. Again, I take this with a grain of salt. When has Donald Trump ever stood up to Israel? They destroyed our Iran deal. They killed negotiators of Hamas when Donald Trump was negotiating with them in Doha. And now, of course, they broke this ceasefire since day one that he put together with the Gulf Arab states that all agreed to this. Now, of course, the big problem with the whole thing was that Israel and Gaza, particularly Hamas, had no say in this 21-point plan. But now he's saying he's going to threaten to cut off Israeli aid, get it, if they decide to annex the West Bank, which Israel calls Judea and Samaria. President Trump and Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said they both oppose the annexation. But we see right-wing fanatics and these factions in Jerusalem see an invasion of territory as a means to blocking Palestinian statehood. So if they're in this territory, what they believe is, and again, they said they want Jewish settlements in Gaza, which again would be a complete violation of the ceasefire agreement, and again would put an end to the Palestinian statehood. They're also talking about doing that in the West Bank right now. So again, you see things heat up there. I played you that woman yesterday, Abby Martin. So if you want to go back and listen to her experience in the West Bank, which seems like an all-out war zone, in my estimation, it just sounds like things are completely unstable there. But again, Israel would lose all of its support from the United States if that happened. This is what Trump told Time Magazine. I doubt. I can't see that. He's very friendly with Netanyahu. He's saying it won't happen because I gave my word to the Arab states. Well, hey, Israel's talking about it. Netanyahu's own government is even talking about it. They've said this. They want this. This is what they want. In fact, I believe I wrote it down here. Let me see what they said here. Yep, Ben-Gvir urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to go back into Gaza at full strength and kill all of them. So much for a ceasefire. We know that they've also said, Netanyahu said this, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Danny Danon, all of them. So that Israel never signed anything. They never would allow the creation of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu tells the U.S. press one thing, and then he goes back and tells the Israeli press another thing. Yep. It goes on and on and on, folks. It just goes in a circle. That's all it is. They take what they want. They do what they want. They kill who they want to kill. And we just continue to aid and abet that entire process. But don't worry, you had the reassurance yesterday of both Vance and Netanyahu just a couple of days ago saying, no, I don't control the United States. Oh, that's ridiculous. I've only been going around telling everyone that. It's just such a joke, folks. So, again, expect that chaos to get out of control. Very, very soon again, the war will uptick again with Gaza, as we're already seeing bombings take place in southern and central Gaza, killing more innocent Palestinians, mind you. And the war with Iran is certainly in their rearview mirror. So that will continue to happen sooner than later. Expect it. Don't forget where you heard it. You know, a majority of Californians are allegedly back Gavin Newsom's redistricting measure. Did you hear this? Now, again, right when this whole initiative came out a couple months ago, most Californians were opposed to this. So I saw this in the Hill today, and I started laughing. I don't really trust many of these polls, too, by the way. I never do. I don't let it sway my vote at all. But this is just to get in your psyche for when they, probably steal this. That's what I'm thinking right now. It says here, a majority of California voters say they support Gavin Newsom's redistricting effort known as Prop 50, which you should all vote no on, according to an Emerson College survey released on Friday. So what did they find? It says here 57% of likely voters in the state said they'd back the measure, while 37% said they did not support it. Another 6% had no idea what was going on. Not too, that's indicative of Californians. Don't know what the hell's going on. So here's my first thing. I read this. I see the executive director of the college polling, Spencer Kimball, whoever the hell that is. Well, less than 2 weeks until the California special election for Prop 50, the measure looks likely to pass, with results again outside of the poll's margin of error, says this jerk who no one knows who the hell he is. Certain demographics and their groups that were hesitant to support the measure last month have come around to support Prop 50, such as black voters, whose support increased from 45 to 71%. Let's stop for a second. Let's stop and ask ourselves this question. They told you there's this poll, right? They said, oh, look at this overwhelming support. Now, 57% of your Californians say, absolutely, let's redistrict, let's steal 5 more Republican seats. We'll give it to Democrats. We'll send 5 more Democrats as our state loses population, as our state loses seats. That way we can, maintain some type of Democratic hierarchy here in California. And the hell with the hell with the Republicans. This is their plan. But you have to ask yourself the question. Did this poll tell you who they polled? Did it tell you how many people they polled? Did they poll 1,000 people? Did they poll 100,000, 10,000, a million? Do you have any idea who these likely voters are? Are they all Democrats? Are they all Republicans? Does anybody know? You don't know. You don't know. That's the thing. It could be a tiny little poll. Sometimes, you go on and you look at these polls and, oh, here we go. It's at the very bottom of the article. See, there it is. Look at this, folks. I was right. The Emerson College poll was conducted on October 20th and 21st among 900 likely California voters. Again, we don't know their party affiliation. We don't know their demographic or where they live in the state, or if they've ever voted before in their entire life. They're using 900 people in a state of roughly 38.9 million. And again, millions upon millions of voters. I think there's roughly, I don't know how many eligible voters there are in California right now. Again, things change in the state because of the loss of population thanks to the exodus in California. But how can you take a poll of 900 people and think that's indicative of a population of millions upon millions of people? You can't. So why would you listen to this? I mean, realistically, again, you don't know where it is. It could be in San Francisco, for all you know. Right? That would be indicative of something, right? If you knew where the hell it was. How many voters? Let me look. I want to look at this. How many eligible voters are there in California? This would be funny to look this up. And again, compare the sample size to what they're actually doing. Let me see this quickly. Because, again, this will shed some light on this Prop 50 and how well it's going. Let's see here. Total number of registered voters in California. Look at this. It says here in 2020. Well, let's see, 2023. Look at this. Total of 22.1 million Californians are registered to vote. And they took 900 people? Seriously? Look at this, though. It says a total of 22,114,456 Californians are registered to vote, which is 82.91% of eligible Californians. Yep, there it is. So they're taking 900 people and telling you exactly what this block of 22 million people think. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And you shouldn't even take any of this seriously at all. At all. Nope, I wouldn't. Why would you? It's ridiculous. So don't listen to the headlines. You should vote no on this. It's an awful proposition. It's just to give Democrats more power. And again, you're taking away a supposed nonpartisan committee to redraw the map in favor of Democrats, specifically in favor of Democrats. This is what they're doing. And again, he wants to take power away from the nonpartisan board and give it to the state democratically majority legislators to write their own maps. Now, does that sound like democracy to you folks? What Gavin Newsom tries to come out and say time and time again, this putz, this jerk, this gelhead schmuck. That's what he is, by the way. Oh, by the way, Breitbart has a good article. Gavin Newsom, while he's trying to plan to destroy the congressional districts in California to give himself, a pat on the back that he's the savior for Democrats for when he runs in 2028, says here that cash-strapped California, right, that's going to be in $72 billion worth of debt by the time he leaves office, says here that California is going to spend $140 million to shore up Planned Parenthood abortion clinics. Yep. Now, Gavin Newsom will give it to illegal aliens, to abortion clinics, and then say he has no money for the roads, for the infrastructure, for the schools. None of that. That's not important. It's to pander to the base. He's got to be as radical as possible because that's who he is. He's a shell of a man, really. He's just a lowlife, is all Gavin Newsom is. Yep. Talks about democracy and then does this. With the redistricting, does this with your taxpayer dollars. But look at this. It says, under the Hyde Amendment, federal tax dollars cannot be used to fund abortions, right? That was a big blow to the, abortion mills in many states. However, Planned Parenthood has received federal funding for other purposes. God knows what that is. Money, critics said, was fungible. Yep. So interchangeable for God knows what. President Trump cut off all federal funding to Planned Parenthood under one Big Beautiful Bill Act signed earlier this year. And since then, Planned Parenthood has become an absolute failure, which I'm very happy to tell you. So what has California done? Well, under Gavin Newsom and his vociferously pro-abortion administration, right, is stepping up to pay their bills. Yep, got to keep that blood money going, folks. Ritualistic in and of itself. That's what it all comes down to. Newsom said at a press conference on Thursday that California is a reproductive freedom state. No, it's not. It's a anti-reproductive freedom state, really, when you think about it. You're destroying reproduction. That's what you're doing. And this latest investment continues to show our belief in protecting access to essential health care in times of distress. Trump's efforts to defund Planned Parenthood put all our communities at risk as people seek basic health care from these community providers. First of all, let's get one thing straight. Let's get one thing perfectly straight here with Planned Parenthood. They don't offer any of these other health care, is what they're trying to say. They're a health care provider. They are an abortion mill, folks. That's what they are. The vast majority of their services are abortion. So don't think it's like they're going into a hospital and getting, x-rays, ultrasounds, this and that. Yeah, they could obviously check and see if you're pregnant. Don't think that they can't. But they're not doing health care for these women. It's exactly the opposite. His office also added that as President Trump continues to attack California, including defunding Planned Parenthood, health centers, I love it, health centers. Call it what it is. It's an abortion bill. That's what it is. Where was I? Sorry. Planned Parenthood, health centers, nationwide in his big, beautiful betrayal, Governor Gavin Newsom today announced investments of over $140 billion of taxpayer money, by the way, in state funding to support these critical health care centers and access points to life-saving care, not for the unborn child, by the way. It's a death sentence for them. And treatment for millions of Californians. I'd love to know what those millions of Californians are getting at these healthcare so-called clinics, which are nothing more than abortion mills. California's Planned Parenthood affiliates operate more than 100 centers across the Golden State, providing more than 1 million patient visits a year to Californians in search of basic health care needs. Let me ask you this. If Gavin Newsom really wanted to offer more health care for mothers that are pregnant, why wouldn't he just send them to hospitals? Why would he send them to an abortion mill? If that's what the whole basic health care need is all about. Why would he just fund money so if any woman who's having a pregnancy or a difficult pregnancy or sick during a pregnancy, why would he open it up to a regular hospital? Because that's not what it's for, folks. They just told you in the article. These funds that they're giving are fungible, right? That's what they want. So now California, obviously suffering budget deficits for the past 2 years, squandering record budget surpluses that he once had when he came into office, Gavin Newsom. Now he's looking at complete deficit spending and state debt. The most recent budget deficit was $12 billion, leading state legislators to cut spending on several programs, but they always find $140 million lying around for abortion bills, as well as $251 million for the special election that he now hopes to win to gerrymander congressional maps for these Democrats that they drew behind closed doors. Because that's democracy, right? We write your congressional districts, we'll push out the Republicans, you'll have zero representation, in a democracy, of course. And if you want to kill your offspring, we're very much in favor of that. We're very much in favor of that, too. What an absolute travesty. How sickening is this, folks? I mean, this guy, every single thing that is just to the fringe for leftism, this is what this guy does. Very, very sick. ICE is now trying to prevent these ICE trackers being planted by Democrats, and it's obviously could endanger agents, is what Pam Bondi says. Attorney General Pam Bondi said actually on October 22nd that the plan by Democrats now is to launch an online platform that could actually track immigration and immigration and customs enforcement operations in LA, and actually could endanger these federal agents and expose them to harassment or violence. They came out with this big press conference in Los Angeles where they had Representative Robert Garcia, who nobody knows who he is, said at an October 21st press conference alongside Mayor Karen Bassel that Democrats on the House Oversight Committee are now going to launch what Garcia calls a master ICE tracker. So they actually want to have an app where you can go in and say, hey, here's where ICE is right now. So you can locate them, so you know they're in your community. That's what they want to do. So this online database would actually allow the public to submit to review reports of ICE activity across LA, including videos and other data, so they can show exactly where they are. Now, Garcia said over the course of the next couple of weeks, the House Oversight Committee will be launching on their website a master ICE tracker where we're going to be essentially tracking every single instance that we can verify that the community will send. I mean, again, the whole reason for this, we've seen ICE agents being attacked. Attacks are up 1,000% right now. We're seeing it time and time again. They're getting worse and worse and worse. This is only going to get out of hand much more, folks. You're seeing the rhetoric for violence against these ICE agents upticking greatly, not only from our politicians, but from local leaders as well. And again, Garcia describes this initiative as part of a wide congressional investigation into alleged wrongful detentions by ICE under the Trump administration. He also said he plans to hold a congressional field hearing in LA where residents can testify about immigration enforcement concerns. Calling it a part of a broader inquiry into alleged civil rights violations by ICE agents. This is so stupid. This is extremely stupid. And again, I'm not saying that I like that ICE is covered in masks, but I understand why they're doing this. I understand why this is happening. You've heard this from Gavin Newsom as well. He said it on one of the late night talk shows that nobody listens to, saying things like, hey, if somebody jumps out of a car and, they're wearing a mask, I don't know what I would do. Who cares, first of all? Does he actually think that it's going to happen to him? That's another stupid thing. But the people they're going after, and again, I'm not for them going into a business, asking people for papers. I don't like that either. But the vast majority of people they are detaining are illegal aliens that have committed some type of crime in America already. That's what we're seeing. Now, this Garcia has now joined forces though, with Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, who is leading a parallel investigation through the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. The two lawmakers recently sent a letter to the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem demanding records on what they described as unlawful detention of U.S. citizens by by ICE agents. So again, this is all coming to a head right now. They will do anything for the illegal alien, including put federal agents in danger. This is what's happening right now. This is exactly what's happening. Tom Homan said that the Department of Justice, was already investigating the financing and organization of several groups that are attacking ICE agents and facilities in a coordinated way. So now you're going to have an app stating exactly where these agents are conducting a raid or detaining people whom have no right to be in the country. And for what? So they can, again, interfere in this investigation. They can interfere in this raid, this detainment of an illegal alien. And again, you've seen that in a couple different states where people actually start to, get in the personal space of these agents. They threaten them. We've seen, obviously, in Chicago and Broadview, them actually shooting into an ICE facility, killing people. Actually killed two detainees, among other people. But the DOJ under the Trump administration previously pressured Apple and Meta to remove these apps and social media pages that have tracked these ICE operations, and you can understand why. Apple deleted an app called Ice Block earlier this month following a DOJ request citing potential risk to agents' safety. And they're absolutely right. This is the whole purpose of this. They want to make it so difficult for ICE to do their job, they'll simply stop doing it. This would be a win for them. This is your Congress, your Democratic Congress, I should say. This is what they want. They want to make it more and more difficult. And again, they're running through this whole charade of, again, citing things like, for example, they're just going after people that look Latino because they don't look like a U.S. citizen. First of all, I don't know what that looks like. This is what they say. This is what Garcia said on October 22nd. He says, why? Because they look like me? Because they are of Latino origin? Because they are suspected to not be a U.S. citizen? Or because they are suspected of crimes they have not committed? Well, first of all, jackass, most of the people they've arrested have committed some heinous crimes in the United States. Are you opposed to that too? Again, if you're here illegally, you have committed a crime. I've read this to you before. Dumb Lemonhead said the same thing. It's the same rhetoric. These people have committed crimes. They have committed a crime by being here illegally. Okay? Now, that being said, there needs to be some sort of due process to detain people of whom have not committed another crime in the United States. So the Department of Homeland Security needs to go through and, again, figure out how to do this following protocols. That's my way of saying it lightly, of course, because, again, I don't agree with just going into a business saying, show me your papers. To me, that's completely unacceptable. But, again, what do you do when you have roughly 50 million illegals in this country? What do you do when you have 55 million people in this country that have expired visas, that have just overstayed their visit and are here in the country illegally? Can you even get a database? How do you have a database on people you have no record of? So, again, we're in very difficult times right now with this whole ICE campaign. But I want to play you a clip of somebody who was speaking at a protest just the other day I think it was right around the Known Kings protest time. This is a high school teacher and member of Union del Barrio. His name is Ron Gochez. And listen to his rhetoric about how to handle ICE. If you don't believe me that these attacks are imminent and, of course, can be very deadly.
This is South Central Los Angeles. They are not the only ones with guns in this city. They're not the only ones, and don't forget that. And I don't say that because we're calling for violence. I'm saying that because the people have every right to defend themselves against masked, unidentified gunmen with AR-15s and other military rifles. The people have every right to defend themselves.
Okay, so he's calling for violence while saying he's not calling for violence, saying that they're unidentified, and calling for, of course, people to obtain firearms. We heard Don Lemon say this. We've heard a lot of them say this as of late. And it's only getting more and more out of control as time goes on. But one thing I found interesting about this clown, he's supposedly a high school teacher, and he's a part of this Union del Barrio, okay? And that is this independent organization. It's a political organization. And it's dedicated to the struggle on behalf of La Raza. And what does La Raza mean? It means the race in Spanish. Living within the current United States borders. And it says we operate a volunteer membership, entirely self-financed through membership dues, community contributions, and local fundraising. So it says here they do not take their struggle lightly. The struggle, right? Okay. Our communities suffer under terrible conditions. While the hatred and political attacks our peoples are forced to endure are unprecedented. Our labor is exploited. Every year, hundreds die attempting to find a better life north of the U.S.-Mexico border. So let's stop for a second. La Raza, the race. First of all, being in Latin America doesn't mean you are one race. There are many different races in Latin America. Let's just understand this. Latino does not mean you are a brown person. The vast majority of people actually are white. They live in Central and South America. They're Spanish. That's a truism. People from Spain are not a different race. Or people from Portugal, if we want to go to Brazil, are not a different race. That's just the truth. So, again, the whole thing is stupid, right? And again, that's why you see Latino not separated as race. These people are largely white. So let's understand that. They can't even figure out their own identity, I guess. I don't understand this. But really what they're enforcing here is illegal migration in the United States, and then again, complaining about living in the United States when they get here, when they live in awful conditions. They claim terrible conditions. Their work is exploited. Well, of course their work is exploited. They're not a legal citizen. This is why I said we need a nation of citizens, not a nation of citizens and illegal aliens, because then their work does get exploited. They get less pay. They can't access certain things. And if they do, it's done illegally. That's the whole problem behind all this. But they're encouraging more of this behavior. And they don't want to see other illegal aliens being deported. So ICE agents, they're under a lot right now. We're seeing a lot of this crimes against them uptick. And again, the reason why they're masked, the reason why they don't have their name on their badge, because they don't want to be doxxed by people like this, where people can go and commit violence in their homes and put themselves and, of course, their families at risk. Makes perfect sense to me. And by the way, they do have identification badges on, too, when they do this. All right, one final thing before we end today's show. Yep. Actually, I'm going to try to get through both of these. I have two left. I'm going to go through this quickly as I can. JB Pritzker, the jumbo blimp himself, was on with Bret Baier yesterday on Special Report, and things did not go so well for him, as one could imagine. He had this to say. Take a listen to this.
Does Chicago have the highest murder rate of all the big cities?
Well, we are not in the top 30 in terms of our murder rate. Indeed,
well,
our murder rate it has been cut in half over the last 4 years, and every year it's gone down by double digits. And if you look at all of the violent crime over the last 4 years,
here's a map.
They've all gone down.
U.S. cities, 17.47 per 100,000 population. Chicago is number one over Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Phoenix, Los Angeles, New York, and San Diego.
What I'm explaining to you is when you want to fight crime. Look, you can pull statistics up.
No,
I can
these are
too.
Murders.
I'm explaining to you that our murder rate has been cut in half. And very importantly, Brett, and you got to hear this, very importantly, we've been doing the things that are necessary to bring crime down, right? We've invested in community violence interruption. We've invested in police. I've added more state police than any governor in quite a long time. It's very important that we do both of those things and more to invest in our communities so that we bring crime down. We're doing.
So he's still evading the question. You have the highest crime rate in the nation out of Chicago. With the statistic out of 100,000 people. They lead that. More so than New York, more so than Los Angeles. Now, there could be an issue, too, with reporting, because a lot of times these crimes don't even get reported anymore because they know the police aren't doing anything. But I'm willing to make a bet that some of these are even higher than what they're reporting here. Again, I'm not denying what Chicago's statistics are, because every weekend we see 40 shot, 50 shot, 58 shot, 60 shot, so many dead every single weekend. It's out of control in a lot of these neighborhoods in Chicago. Now, parts of Chicago are not necessarily all like this, but there are neighborhoods where a lot of these crimes occur. And again, these murder rates begin to uptick very, very quickly. So, JB Pritzker, saying that crime isn't really happening there is pretty ridiculous, too. I'd have to say. Pretty ridiculous. Again, saying that the crime is cut in half, so you're saying it's even worse. I mean, the numbers are already shocking. You're saying it was even more shocking prior to this. Washington Times had an article, too, by the way, just to key into what we were talking about with ICE. It says DHS uses riot response as anti-ICE protests become more violent in Chicago. So, Mr. Pritzker, how come the anti-ICE protests are escalating their confrontations with federal immigration authorities in Illinois, particularly Chicago, forcing officers to use riot responses to suppress what the Department of Homeland Security has called one of the most violent days, if you have more officers on the ground and they are protecting more people? Can you explain that, sir? No, I don't think he can. Oh, by the way, too, this is in Jihad Watch. One last thing before we close today's show. It says, inside Syria, 1,800 Christians and Alawites massacred in the last few days in silent genocide under Al-Shara's rule. Did you hear this on the mainstream news? Of course you did. Why would you? We're talking about Christians in another country. Why would you hear about this? It says here that the victims of this severe persecution are primarily Christians. The atrocities in Syria under the rule of the seasoned Al-Qaeda jihadist Ahmed Al-Sharaa are being ignored in the Western world, of course. It says here that the silent genocide of 1,800 Christians massacred in Syria under the rule of the new leader, by this Al-Sharaa putz, who was a member of Al-Qaeda, has continued on. This took place earlier in the year, in March, but I wonder why this never makes news. Why are they telling us that they're targeting Christians? Killing them. We heard about what's happening in the Congo and parts of Africa, Nigeria, and what have you, where Boko Haram is active and well. But why are we hearing about this in the Middle East? Why are we not hearing about Christians being persecuted and killed for their religious belief? Why are we never hearing anything about this? I often ask myself that many, many times. As of late, they've fawned over this guy. I don't understand why. We saw David Petraeus, who portrays us as idiots, when he speaks to this clown like he did at the UN not too long ago. Some of you probably remember this. Take a listen.
How tough your job is right now, how much is riding on you personally, and I know you have to be keenly aware of that. The pressure has to be enormous. When people ask me what was it like to command the surge in Iraq, I would respond by saying it was the most grinding experience of my life, but it was also the most important one. So this next one is about you personally. How are you holding up under all this pressure? Are you getting time to do some thinking? Are you getting enough sleep at night? Again, I've been there, and it is so very, very hard. And your many fans, and I am one of them, we do have worries.
Wow. So David Petraeus, former four-star general, director of the CIA, is a very big fan of the Syrian president Al-Sharaa, who is killing Christians. And by the way, this took place after this reported in March of 2025 this year, where these murders were taking place and continue to take place. Yep. This is your top brass in the United States. They're fans of this. Never any concerns about the demonization of people for their faith, apparently, from people like David Petraeus. Look at this. It says, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, more than 1,000 civilians, including Christians, Alawites, and Druze, have been executed in a wave of revenge following the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime in December of 2024. The new leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, has promised national unity, but the facts on the ground reveal mass executions, sectarian attacks, and forced displacements, particularly against religious minorities. That would be Christians. And, it doesn't help, too, that Israel has been air bombing inside Syria for quite some time now. And again, why is this not being addressed? How come no one's saying anything about this? How come no one's saying a word about what's happening in Syria right now? How come no one's standing up for those people? Why haven't you seen anybody in any Western nation say anything about this? Well, I think you know why. It's not on their top priority. If it was Jews or Muslims getting killed en masse like this, you'd hear never the end of it. And you really shouldn't, either way. But how come when it's Christians, we always remain to stay silent? It's just something to think about. Folks, hope you enjoy this show. Hope you will share it with some friends, and I will see you on Monday for the next Marco Geray show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.